Thank you very much for joining me on another edition of Cine Critique. I'm Shane Bassett, and I'm speaking to my fellow Australian, Claudia Black, who's in a new movie, Time Now, which is going to be at the Austin Film Festival, which is pretty awesome. Hi, Claudia.
G'day. Haven't said that in ever. We never actually say g'day, I don't think.
Well, you know what? A very big pizza company have recently released a Vegemite pizza in this country. I haven't tried one yet. I'm not sure I want to. What do you think about that, though? A Vegemite pizza?
I'm pretty much comprised of Vegemite, I think. That's the only thing I would eat. I was such a picky eater. Yeah, Vegemite sandwiches on white bread was like what I had every day at school for as much as I could convince mum to let me. So, I mean, I think now that the world is really coming to terms with umami as an important flavor profile, I think that absolutely fits the bill. I don't know what I'd put with it though. What would you put with I mean, I will sometimes have a muffin, like a toasted muffin with an egg and a slice of tomato and some Vegemite, very well buttered, little bit of Vegemite. But I can't imagine what you'd put on the pizza.
Well, it's just cheese and Vegemite. I haven't tried one yet. It looks like something I could actually make at home, but I thought I'd run it by you.
Yeah, that's a little bit of vomit in my mouth, I have to say, if I'm honest.
Time Now is an independent film. It's fairly powerful and it doesn't hold back in what it wants to say. Your character as Joan has, it's got, you're not a main character, but you have an impact. You're there about in quite a lot of scenes. Firstly, how did you get the role? Was it an audition process?
Well, firstly, I think I am a main character, but anyway, let's move on. Just kidding. I think she actually is quite central, and I think she was very important to Spencer. I don't care whether I'm a character actor or how many scenes I have, but I just think as far as Spencer was concerned, she was always really, really central and very important. And he was quite nervous about the casting, actually, because I think originally they were looking for someone to play the mum, and they hadn't found the gorgeous actress they found. And so they were sort of, Spencer was more worried and nervous about who was going to play Joan. And the more we talked, he convinced me to switch over and play Joan. He said, look, it's just really important to me that we get this right, because she's sort of the crusty heart of the film and sort of reflects, Detroit with all its potential and decay. Yeah. And what he was wanting to do in his little love letter to Detroit was to sort of go in and not deliberately force his hand in terms of forcing Detroit to be a character in the movie, but just a little love letter to a place that deserves to have growth in the arts. So it was, to fully answer your question, my manager knows some of the, knew the producer and knew Spencer, and said, look, this guy's got the money. It's a tiny, tiny micro budget. I think he's got something as a filmmaker. And I think that if you do it, maybe not just for this film, but just as an investment in him and who you two might be as collaborators. I said, sure, let me read it and have a look. And I'm always looking for that just something that's interesting. And, the relational aspect of my connection with Spencer and the way that we chatted and the way we worked together. He's incredibly humble and interesting to me, and has a level of sophistication as a storyteller that's unpretentious. And so, yeah, that always has enormous value for me in the indie space, because I think with the right script and the right story and the right time, this kid's going to be a very interesting, like really interesting filmmaker. And I can see a lot of the evidence already in this first film of his. So this was a really fun opportunity for me that had how often have I had in my career zero stakes? And some people might think if they're focused on building some kind of career that they're supposedly manufacturing, happens for a few artists, I think, who are really genuinely built as movie stars, and they have the abilities that go along with that to pull that off. I really loved the fact that we were sort of making it off the smell of an oily rag, and it was just a privileged space to be in, where I had something to offer technically that helped them every day get their day, and everyone was so receptive and grateful, and and co-creative. And I've been in a lot of spaces where there's been a lot of money involved, and they just thought, well, what does she know? She's just a girl. And it was really frustrating for years. So I finally got to be my full self in a space where I have a lot to offer, and I would humbly offer it. And it was just absolutely devoured as useful. So, yeah, it was great.
Although it is an indie movie, as you say, Spencer, the director, when we mention the name Spencer, you're talking about the director, he really did squeeze everything he could out of that micro budget, and the cast were great. Church with Joan, like you love going to church in the movie. Did you create a backstory for your character or anything like that yourself?
Well, Spencer and I did. I don't often. I have a very interesting process. I think that I had a weird experience on a DVD commentary. Remember those?
I do remember those.
Opening titles, and the director says, "Okay, Claudia, tell me about your process." And there was just sort of this silence. And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, how do you approach things?" And I said, "I honestly don't understand the question." And he just looked at me, and I said, "I just do it. So, it's so intuitive for me."
Yeah.
I either read something and understand completely what this character's purpose is, or it just doesn't even touch the side. So I never try to force an audition. If I read something and go, "Oh, that's so funny," I know I'm going to be able to bring that to life, whether they give me the role or not. I know I'm going to have a good experience embodying that for the 3 minutes I get to go in and do that. If I'm going to have fun and I feel like I'm serving the character in some way, I'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
But it's the worst. I mean, it's really important to have the power of analysis, and I do my script analysis when I have to, more to do with the broader story and what colors that particular character brings to the canvas, so that I know my place in that world. So I'm really in service rather than thinking I am the central character. But I think talking about the way that we work in our process is not, that was anathema to me at that time. I will say that with Spencer, we really actually had fun talking about who he thought she was. And I really enjoyed that process with him, talking about it and thinking about, her underpinnings and filling those spaces, because Spencer's one of those directors who gives a lot of space on air.
Okay.
You may have noticed it's not an ADD post MTV generation film. It's got space, and he takes his time, and there's
very natural.
Time itself becomes a character in the film, because it's, as per the title, he's actually punctuating his moments with this sort of, without over explaining. And there's a lot of subtext. There's a space for subtext and for the audience to fill those spaces. And I think that's an incredibly brave and mature quality for a filmmaker of his age to have. So I think when he really finds those beats with scripts down the line, it's going to be really, really powerful. And he did really well to cast the actors and find the actors that he did on this micro budget.
Yeah, it's a good cast. I'll ask about Eleanor shortly. She was working with her. She was impressive.
My friend.
She actually reminds me of a young Melanie Linsky. Do you know Melanie Linsky? She's a Kiwi actress who worked when she was young with Kate Winslet in a movie called Heavenly Creatures, and now has been in a lot of. And
she's got a big career in the States, right?
Yeah, she has now. Yeah, so that's who Eleanor reminded me of, the young Melanie Linsky in this film.
Interesting.
And I'll get to Eleanor. The car that you drive around is a classic. Was it someone's car or just hired for the movie? It's very nice.
No, it was a beauty, and showing my age here, I was the only person on that entire set of 5 people or whatever who could drive manual.
Right. Okay.
So after I had to pick up the director in the morning at the start of my day in the picture car, if it started, and then drive him home at the end of the shoot to put it to lock it up in the secured location we had for it.
Oh wow.
It's been a while since I'd driven that car, and so that was there was something really lyrical about driving around Detroit with this sort of weighted history of cars and automobiles, and and driving this beauty in this ghost town of a town that we're trying to revive through the arts, and Joan is this last sort of crusty vestige of heart and meaning in this place that's, you know, echoes of tragedy.
I love the car, and I thought you did well with the stick shift.
Did you hear the times where I was sort of riding the clutch and I didn't have enough gas going, and we almost stalled as we went round the stop signs?
No, I watched the movie with headphones on too, but I missed that. Oh well.
Good. I think they cut a lot of that extra stuff. I was like, I'm trying to slow down, and I'm really trying not to do this over dialogue, so I'll put as little gas on as I possibly can. But yeah, it's interesting. It plays out quite well. The car itself becomes a little bit of a character too.
It did. A location you're into looked natural, so it looked like a real place. Was the bookstore. Very nice, cool bookstore. That was a real place that you filmed in, I assume?
Yeah, I don't know if I can pull up quickly the name of the bookstore to give them full props. It's
yeah, that'd be good to know. I'll cross promote them, because it was looked like a very nice old school place.
Really soulful, beautiful place. And I just texted Eleanor and Spencer some funny photos. So the bookstore is called John K. King Books, Used and Rare.
Very nice, cool. I'll make sure I tag them. I can see that. Yep.
Yeah, and I posted it's really cool. They have sort of, you know, cool street art, a lot of cool street art in Detroit. And this particular shot that I took that's actually on my Instagram page, just rows and rows and rows of
there it is. Yeah, I was jealous. I'm a sucker for a bookstore, and you don't get a lot of them around in Sydney. There's a few, but not that many these days.
I know. So yeah, I mean, he pulled in a lot of favors, as we do when we're doing our first film, and then you want to make sure you haven't pissed too many people off, because then you're going to want to do it all again at some point. And I just felt really grateful to come out the other side, because it can be such a slog. You've got to love it, you know, a 14-day shoot or a 12-day shoot or whatever this was. How he managed to then sneak in those drone shots. I mean, he really elevated something that most people just don't have the chops to pull off. And I really think Spencer King is one to watch, and I think Eleanor is too. But I mean, she's just in my pocket, and she just goes with me wherever I go. We have lovely, you know, she comes to visit her mum in LA, and we'll catch up. And
well, please say hello to her for me next time you see her, and tell her I was very impressed in her performance. You've almost told me
that will mean a lot to her.
Oh, as a movie analyst, I was watching her closely. I think she's going to have a bit of a decent career ahead of her, if she hasn't had one already. I mean, she's already done a pretty good volume of work.
Well, she's studying at the moment. She's training, and she gets the jobs in between, and now she's back sort of finishing off her training. And I would love it if you could actually reach out to her directly, because that would mean the world to her. And since I hold her so dearly in my heart, I actually know that coming from you professionally, she would value that so much.
Thanks. Well, let's make it happen, I think, because I'd love to promote this movie a little bit more.
Oh, wonderful.
What's it like being an Australian in, you know, globally, in LA, in London, wherever you might be working? And you were mentioning your age without mentioning your age, and we're probably of the same vintage. So do you still enjoy it, or do you want to come back and work at home? Like, what is it like as an actor in the 2000s as opposed to in the 90s and the early 2000s? Has it changed much?
Great question. I mean, I just have a voracious appetite to work and collaborate. So well,
you do different things, which is good. Your career is full of different things, and I think that probably makes it fresh.
Right. And I mean, I never thought I'd end up becoming a trauma specialist, but I think that also weaves back into, I didn't know that I was so severely traumatized either. And so that's been an essential part of me growing as an artist too, because I think not understanding those parts of myself, I would be doomed to play certain aspects of roles ironically and without self-awareness.
Yeah, right.
So that's been what I call the university of life. Everything that I've forked out in my savings that I sort of carefully squirreled away has been in service of me actually coming into wholeness and awareness and becoming a better mum and a better person and hopefully a better artist and having a much stronger point of view now. I think in Australia, it was really great in a way for it to be a smaller pool and also fewer opportunities around. So we were less precious, and people will say, what is it about Australians and why do they have this kind of je ne sais quoi, this sort of energy and this earthiness and this whatever?
Yeah.
So, well, there's literal stuff. We sort of often walk around barefoot, burning the soles of our feet at the beach when we sort of, from the moment we jump out of the car to the moment we get off the sand into the water, that our feet in a grounding training, you know, it's like walking on hot coals. There are those things that just kind of make us sort of grounded and connected to nature. And, you know, LA, I appreciate for that reason, because you are actually 5 minutes from a hike or a surf if you want to get in the water. And I have been actually this last summer, I did surf. And,
that's
you know,
good.
there are ways of connecting to nature in California in particular that are extraordinary. And the wildlife. I mean, I think all the time about the fact that as an Australian, people are so enchanted by the exoticism of our marsupials and our, you know, the animals that we have in Australia. And to me, that's just kind of old news. I'll get a raccoon coming across my yard or a coyote trying to steal my sneakers in the morning on, you know, I'll catch them on camera and they're sort of chewing away at my sneakers and then guarding them. And, you know, these amazing owls and hawks that will swoop over me and hummingbirds. And I'm really enchanted as a person living in LA because I find that exotic, you know. But I think Australians have always been, we're really lucky when we travel for work because, especially in America, we're really highly regarded and well received. And I'm also very sensitive about, I don't want to play an iconic character where I am taking someone's, you know, character from their homeland. You know, it's difficult territory, you know, like, you know, I think with Bridget Jones' Diary that Renee Zellweger did an outstanding job. I can't imagine anyone else playing her, but at the same time, she was such a beloved and iconic English character that to have someone else from another country portray her is sort of odd. And yet in the old school of theatre, if we take away racism and sexism, everyone should have been able to play every role, young or old.
I think right? So. Yeah, exactly.
But now with diversity, it's really important for all the voices to be heard and everyone to be included. And so I'm more than happy to sort of, you know, to sit back and have people who are really deserving helm these roles that otherwise might have been given to maybe in Australia, I've been given roles that could have gone to someone else, but I was the last person standing at the time.
Sure, that happens too, because it's so competitive.
Yeah. And that is taken advantage of, I think, in Los Angeles. It is difficult because you get to a certain age where, you know, it's like an abusive relationship. You're waiting for the phone to ring and it may not ring and you have to love it, otherwise you wouldn't do it. And I think there's been an incredible reckoning and it feels like it's very vindicating, and there's, you know, there's a lot of weight to it, but it's very vindicating to have the Time's Up and the Me Too movement occurring and for it to be a legitimate movement. And
I know.
For me personally, to be at this intersection as a trauma specialist and as a performer that's had a lot of personal and lived experience with this type of trauma, to be working in that space and helping people who've been in those trenches and healing myself and having those conversations and being part of the change in the culture too, and not sitting on the sidelines and expecting it to change and being actively involved in it. You know, I will now offer that to men. When I start a rehearsal process with a man, I will say, what are your physical boundaries? Is there anything you don't want me to do to your body when we start rehearsing? And they'll generally, in my experience so far, they have said, oh, I'm fine, you can do it. They'll pause, and it's anathema to them because they're like, no one's ever asked me that before. And they go, oh no, I'm fine, you can do anything. And then I pause and I say, are you sure? Yeah. And I say, how about smacking you on the back of the head? Are you all right with that? And they say, no, I bloody hate that. My father used to do that.
See, there you go.
Exactly. So I say, so let's keep the space open for other things you might remember or decide are things that you'd like to set a boundary around. And what's great about that, and I think is happening in a lot of other spaces in the culture with Time's Up and Me Too and workspaces, is creating scripts, offering scripts that can then be transformed, but at least making an offering so that there's a blueprint for a way to move forward. And so that feels really exciting with, I mean, I don't hide my age, I just turned 49. And I think, to have 30 years of experience in the business and loving it, it's so dear to me. And to be in this space now at this crossroad where it's actually transforming and becoming healthier and having things to offer in that space is really powerful and beautiful. So I think indie films for me are an incredible place for me to play, because I can be a grounding influence and hopefully a positive influence and not a jaded one, because I'm not. Somehow I managed to protect my heart and to not be jaded about, I mean, we're carny folk. Everybody in the film business is somehow a misfit or an outlier or a truth speaker or
in some way, yes.
In some way, we're either the kids who didn't do our homework, or we did too much of it, or we're neurodiverse. A lot of us are. And I think it's really refreshing now on the internet to be able to own all of those parts of ourselves that couldn't find belonging before. And I think that's going to make the business much richer and much more interesting in our storytelling.
I'm really glad that you're such an advocate for Me Too and Time's Up. I mean, I've spoken to so many of your acting colleagues, both here in Australia and around the world, just different celebrities that have the same passion for it and how things have changed. And I could not be happier. I mean, the things and the atrocities that have happened in the past, I really don't think they've stopped completely, but they're changed. And
it's in a broad, there's always I say this a lot, the micro and the macro of the culture, so there's the individual things that are occurring, but we're not supposed to speak up because of the whole colonization thing and being in the Commonwealth and being nice.
Difficult at times what to say and what not to say. I understand that, but
really difficult. And so some of us just have to have that moment where we're leaders, and it's weird. I kind of lead from the back, and I don't like being in a leadership role, but I'm getting more comfortable with it, because I think I have to own the value that I might bring, but at the same time, I think my value is in encouraging other people to find their voices and empower them. I think that's good leadership. I'm not about, not being didactic and allowing for experiential learning. And I think that's what's tough about the business, is when there's a lot of pressure for something to do well financially, there's no room to fail. And I think with art, there has to be. So how do we become, I've worked with some extraordinary teachers and educators who have shaped some really beautiful directors in our time. And it's lovely to see the way they encourage and teach directors. And I think that's going to be a new, because content is king, there's a lot of writer directors. And so the minute I started talking to Spencer, I said, here are some books, you need to read these, because
that's great.
Directors have a responsibility, because content is king and they own what they've written. They now have to traverse and learn how to be relational and talk to actors in a way where they're creating relative safety. And that's what's really interesting about the intersection of art and Me Too and Time's Up, is everything's been too enigmatic, because people who don't consider, I think part of the problem is that some people don't consider themselves to be creatives. They think they're just suits. Okay. And I think everybody's creative. It's just that part of them wasn't nurtured, or they didn't find the space to explore that. So the minute you bifurcate those two aspects of humanity and they say, I'm not creative, then it overburdens the creatives with this mysterious ability to create the magic of the art. And that gives the artist too much power in one area, and then it gives the suits too much power in the other. And I think meeting in the middle and understanding that no one person on a set should have too much power. I've just experienced that on a show where the showrunner got removed and the whole genius story was in them, and now that's gone and everyone else is left to try and pick up the pieces. Is
that right? Oh.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what you think you'd be doing? What occupation would you be doing if you were not a performer, actor? Is there another occupation you think you'd excel at as well as acting?
Oh gosh, I mean, I do really well in the trauma space, but I call it trauma and creativity work, because I think the two are in direct relationship. And so I'm obsessed with anything that has to do with transformation. I love spray paint. If I find a daggy old lamp in my garage and then decide to spray paint it gold, I've suddenly got a new object. And that brings me so much pleasure and joy. It almost shouldn't, but it does. So I love the quick fix transformations, and I do have a deep fondness for the other types of, especially human transformation. So I have an interior design thing that's sort of in the background, but not good with
That's cool.
maths and
That's creative,
architecture.
of course.
The healing arts are a big thing for me. I think also as a kid, I very much was interested in connecting with everybody in the world, and I really wanted to speak all languages. And so the idea of the UN was very appealing to me, and the idea of the Peace Corps was very interesting to me because it was adventurous and being useful.
Oh, for
So,
sure.
I think if there was, the cinematic reproduction of my childhood would be as the camera's panning down a hallway in a school, and you finally get to a classroom where there's a circle of kids and they're saying, what do you want to be when you grow up? Which is a question we're not supposed to ask anymore. And one kid saying, I want to be an astronaut, and I want to be a fireman, and I would have just said, I want to be useful.
Okay. That's a smart answer though.
But and possibly through a trauma lens, it's probably a big fawning response where I'm just very outer directed and having an external locus of control. But it also, at the same time, it's just from a relational perspective, I don't want to insert myself into an environment. I want to have purpose, and I want to be useful, where people go, oh shit, thank God she was there for that moment. Sorry, I swore, but I'm an Aussie. I've actually been very restrained talking to you.
Thank you.
But there's just something inherent in me that wants to connect with other people. And the idea, it was very cute. My kids said, when they were a bit younger, I said, let's talk about death and let's talk about funerals and stuff, because it came up. And I said, it's going to happen and we can talk about it. So you can do what's meaningful for you. And I don't have a lot of attachments to what happened to me. And they said, well, what kind of funeral would you want? And I said, well, I kind of want a Viking funeral because I think it's very dramatic to be sent out on a boat and set on fire. Yes. And both my boys by heritage are legitimate Vikings, and they've got very Viking names, and it's very much in that they're anglicized Vikings.
Oh, that's awesome.
Through their father's lineage. And hopefully the cool Vikings that were sort of pastoral and into horticulture, but not so much the pillaging and the bad stuff. But I guess we've got to take the good with the bad with the good. Anyway, I said, I like that. And I said, also, there's this cool technology now where they think they can sort of turn you into a tree where you get buried, but then they plant seeds on top of you and you might turn into a tree. And that's good for the planet. And then I said, but you get to decide what death means to you. No one gets to tell you what that is. And my younger one said, when you die, I'm going to give you, he was ordained with the power to give this to me posthumously, said, I'm going to give you the head of a lion, the wings of something that can fly, and the gift of being able to speak all the languages, not just the human languages, but the languages of everything that communicates. And I got teary and I said, do you know what? I've never looked forward to my death more. Whenever that comes, you've just given me in imagination the most beautiful send-off. And if he can hold that in his heart when I go, and he probably won't because he might be a jaded adult by that point, but I hope not. But what a gorgeous way to be sent off with these abilities. And that's what reminded me of that with the UN thing. He must have overheard me one day saying that if I could do something, I'd love to be in a position where I could be of use and communicate and be a bridge between people.
Well, it sounds like you care for many people other than yourself. And I think that's one of I didn't know about you and I've learnt now. So that is a huge quality. You're also a lovely person. And to wrap it up, before we finish, tell me in your own words about Time Now. I mean, it's premiering at Austin, which is huge. Yeah. And then it'll be available on digital platforms for people to watch all around the world. Why should people watch it? What do you think they'll get out of it? And just tell me your opinion on it, because it is, I only watched it yesterday and I'm still thinking about it.
Yeah, me too. I only watched it a couple of days ago too. I think that we like to feel like we've discovered people.
Mm,
I think there's something exciting, first of all, just from the behind the scenes, point of view. I think that Spencer King is one to watch. I think Eleanor Lambert is one to watch.
definitely.
I think
Both
that,
of them.
yeah, and I think, I'm getting emotional. I'm very proud of both of them because
I can tell you're proud. Yeah.
it's vulnerable putting early art out there when you're doing it. I mean, people will not really appreciate how micro this budget was. Most people will not, no one really I know could have achieved what Spencer did. So they're going to be holding it to a different standard than it, than is fair in some ways.
I understand. Yeah.
I think that they're really interesting emerging artists. I think that Detroit deserves to be supported as it attempts to go through a renaissance and get up on its feet through art and through subculture. And I think it's really important to support independent filmmakers. But I think, like anything in life, I say very graciously to people, it either calls you or it doesn't. So I would say if it is calling you, give it a go. I mean, I think there's so much, we're spoiled now with content. And I think if it's calling you, then it's calling you for a reason. And there's something about it that's going to be, is it going to open doors for people in their imagination? Possibly. But to know, I think it's going to be really interesting for people to follow Spencer and read interviews about him and learn about his process and understand how he made this happen. Because he and his cinematographer and Xian managed to pull this out of the bag quite miraculously. And even though they are next generation Hollywood kids, which is why it's getting PR and attention.
Yes.
They are really interesting, brave, emerging artists. And so I personally was excited to be involved because I believe in them and I'm obsessed with human potential. And so I hope that there's something in it for others. It's a moody, mature film, given the youth of the filmmakers involved, myself excluded.
Oh, don't say that.
Well, I'm young at heart, but I've been around, mate. It's not my first or my second or my third.
That might be the case, but you just look how bohemian and energetic you are. I mean, who cares about age? Your luxurious hair.
Boho. You're just saying I'm boho because I've got curly hair at the moment. I look a bit like a mermaid.
Well, it's luxurious long hair. I'm sure many people would love to know what you do to take care of it. It looks very healthy.
Oh. Well, the bleaching has not been kind, but I am using something I think at the moment called Twisted Sister, which I bought at Marshall's on the bargain shelf, and it's really good.
Well, if it's named after the band, it can't be that bad. He had long, luxurious hair too. Dee Snider.
Yes, exactly. Gosh, you're very chipper for someone who's been really professional at 2 or 3 in the morning. Well done.
Well, thank you very much for your time. I'll stop recording now.